The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's OzonAction webinar on breaking down barriers in the servicing and maintenance of natural refrigerant systems. I am Samira Corban de Gobert from UNEP OzonAction Paris, and I'm pleased to be today's webinar moderator. Let me take a few moments to inform you that OzonAction is offering this forum to promote ozone layer protection through modern electronic communication technologies to increase global online learning and knowledge sharing as part of its clearinghouse services under the Multilateral Fund for the Montreal Protocol implementation. Before we start, let me give you a few details about the session. We will be together for about 1 hour. For the duration of the webinar, all the microphones will be muted to avoid background sound during the presentation. However, should you like to raise questions, please feel free to do so. You can type your question directly into the chat box. Please indicate your name and organization and country. During this webinar, we will have 5 presentations. We will also allocate enough time for question and answer. The webinar starts now. I would like now to introduce Julia Bose, Network Manager, Refrigerants Naturally, to introduce today's topic. And then we will introduce the speakers after the introduction. Julia, we are listening to you.
Okay, also from
We can't hear you, Julia.
Okay, now you can hear me, I guess.
Yes, now we can hear you. Please go
Thank
ahead.
you all for joining. On behalf of Refrigerants Naturally, I just want to say welcome to the webinar. We'll be talking about breaking down barriers in the servicing and maintenance of natural refrigerant systems today. So just to give you a brief introduction to the Refrigerants Naturally initiative. First of all, of course, we would like to thank UNEP OzonAction for hosting this webinar, and thanks everyone else for their interest in joining us today. And now a quick overview over the individual member companies. So the members of the Refrigerants Naturally initiative are the Coca-Cola Company, PepsiCo, Red Bull, SabMiller, and Unilever. SabMiller just joined us at the end of last year, and we're very happy to have Andre Ferry of SabMiller speaking here as well today. The initiative is supported by Greenpeace and UNEP, and we've also been recognized as a partnership for sustainable development by the UN Commission on Sustainable Development. Our focus is replacing the F-gases only with natural refrigerants, including ammonia, carbon dioxide, and hydrocarbons, and we're focused on point-of-sale refrigeration equipment. Our goal is to be a leader. Together we show that a sustainable future is possible and our responsibility. By being an example, Refrigerants Naturally invites and encourages other multinational corporations to take on their responsibilities in tackling climate change and ozone depletion. Together, the member companies have replaced more than 4.5 million refrigeration units. That means 4.5 million units that run on natural refrigerant. Thereby, the member companies have avoided more than 27 million metric tons of CO2 emission. Okay, sorry, just flipped ahead for no reason. During today's webinar, the members will present on bottlenecks and barriers in ensuring service and maintenance for natural refrigerant standalone units and how they have overcome these barriers. They will discuss their applied processes for improving local knowledge on servicing CO2 and hydrocarbon systems. And at this point, I would like to hand over the speaker to the Coca-Cola Company and Antoine Azar.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon for everybody. You hear me?
Yes.
Very good. I'm Antoine Azar from the Coca-Cola company. Sorry, I don't see Julia's screen.
Okay, so Julia, hold on. I will give you the floor. Yes, please go ahead, Julia. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Antoine Azar. As Julia said, I work for the Coca-Cola company as a global program director working on phasing out HFCs from our point of sales equipment. Just to put some perspective, within the Coca-Cola company, the cold drink equipment, what we call coolers, vending machines, and fountain machines that you find in the marketplace, the red coolers, those represents number one of our company carbon footprint. Hence the importance of phasing out HFCs. Uh, we had a clear goal about phasing out HFCs by end of 2015, which was a few months ago. We are not yet at 100%. We have some technical challenges, as you can imagine, but we are going, we are going towards it very quick. Julia, next slide, please. So far, we have about 284 models. So by model, I mean a cooler or a vending machine or a fountain machine that they are certified by the Coca-Cola company and ready to be used. Next, please. We deployed so far, this is end of 2015, 1.8 million unit of HFC free. We have those equipment, I would say, a bit everywhere where we operate today. Those are distributed among the developed countries, hot and humid climate or cold climate. So really, wherever you can find a Coca-Cola can, most probably there is in the same country HFC-free equipment working, and so far without any major issue. Next, please. Okay, so we have been focusing on really four pillars since few years now to drive this program to a success end. First, of course, technology improvement. This is nothing new. I mean, we do this in all our businesses. Everybody do this. We always try to improve the technology, increase reliability. In our case, energy consumption is a very important point because, as refrigerant, energy consumption is a contributor to the, it's the major contributor to the global warming. We are not talking here about ozone depletion, more about global warming because we already phased out CFCs and HCFCs years ago from our system. Now we are phasing out HFCs. The training and after sales, I highlighted this one because this is the main topic of today. And to take a few minutes here on this one is when we started back in 2004, this was really a major topic. How are we going to convert our service infrastructure to service CO2 equipment, which is a new technology with a lot of unknown back then. Since years now, we are, I mean, as you saw, we are almost at 2 million pieces of equipment in the field. So this topic we addressed this topic since years, and the approach we took is training the trainer. So we have a very detailed materials for training. So our suppliers are the main responsible of training the end user. So as we service our equipment, we have been asking the suppliers who supply the equipment to train our technicians and our engineers. And this have been going quite well, I should say. uh, the the fact that we have been introducing the market, you know, not going from 0 to 100%. It's going, you know, step by step. That helped us to cope with the needs in terms of servicing, tools to service, approach, how should we service, train enough technicians to be able to service equipment in their own regions. Supply chain, of course, this remains one of the key elements that we are working on today to make sure that we have control on the cost of the equipment. We have also um, the needed components available locally to be you know, to be delivered to either to our suppliers or to our bottlers. This will help, of course, the maturity of the supply chain will have a huge impact on the cost reduction. Next, please. And to be frank with you, so far we didn't face any major issue in servicing CO2 equipment. Of course, there's always, when you start a new technology, there's always some adjustment to be done. But frankly speaking, CO2 today, as the feedback from the market we are receiving, can be serviced either in the field directly, as you would do with any other technology, or in some cases in the service center. As I explained, you need to have a service training, but it's not something that, you know, there's no major effort to put there in it. So it just needs to be done by your supplier with your technicians. We also have, I mean, every supplier have a detailed list of the equipment or the tools that they need to have to service the equipment in the field or to service it into a service center. There's nothing, you know, we have been hearing about specific or difficulties in servicing CO2 in the field. I can assure you that apart from having the proper training with the proper people who do the job, this is all what you need to service CO2, despite the fact that it's different from HFCs. It works on higher pressure, but it's just a matter of being well trained. This is all for me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine, for your presentation. And now I would like to invite André Fourie, Senior Manager, Environmental Value, SabMiller. André, you have the floor. We are listening to you.
Thank you very much. I will go quite quickly, but just because I know not everybody would know SabMiller, I thought I'd introduce the company first. It's a brewing company with brewing operations globally. As you can see, quite a large operation, turnover of more than $20 billion per annum. So we sell a lot of beer and soft drinks, but primarily beer in many places around the world. The next slide. I am going to put the HFC debate into a little bit, in a few contexts. I think it's very important that we focus on HFCs, but I want to provide some context. So the one is, for us, is a regional context. We operate, the bulk of our markets are in Southern Africa and in Central and Latin America, and we also have large operations across Europe, India, and Australia. So in starting this journey, we've started this journey quite a bit later than Coca-Cola, and we certainly are experiencing a number of challenges, none of those which cannot be overcome, but important to note that in some of the locations, the introduction of HFC and CO2 equipment has been very easy, and in others it's been quite a challenge. And in a number of those markets, particularly in Central America and in Southern Africa, outside of South Africa, we've often been the first to introduce hydrocarbon. So the challenge as the first move that is quite substantial. The next slide. First, just our commitments before I provide a little bit of further context. The one is we've taken a value chain carbon target approach, so across the value chain from agriculture to, for us, the maltings of the barley, to the production, to the packaging, the distribution and the refrigeration across our value chain, to commit to reduce our CO2 emissions by 25% per hectolitre of beer by 2020. And we're about halfway through that process, and we are on track, but that's quite a challenge for us. We also made two specific refrigeration commitments, public commitments. The one was to reduce the emissions from our refrigeration or cooling of our products by 25% by 2020. We're working quite actively towards that. Initially, that was quite a big stretch for us, but as the nature of the fleet in the field changes, we're quite confident that we will meet that. And then probably the most difficult commitment for us was to purchase no new HFC refrigeration equipment by 2020. And I'll say a little bit of that about that in a moment. So just two bits of further context, and I think it's important for those who are, so you can go to the next slide, two important bits of context for those who are in the policy space and advocacy space for companies. First is the context of where refrigeration fits into our overall value chain footprint. You can see it is quite significant, at just under 20% of total value chain carbon emissions. So it's a very important part, but you can understand that there are also a whole range of other very important factors for us need to focus on. So that's the first bit of context. The second one is that, and Antoine referred to this, certainly for us on the next slide, you'll see that the impact of energy consumed by the fridges is substantially bigger in terms of the CO2 equivalent emissions from refrigeration. So it's very important for us, and you can see on the right, those are the types of fridges we are talking about in terms of trade fridges, point of sale equipment, that it's very important that we manage the energy consumption, and that's by far the biggest part of our daily life, is to make sure that we work on the energy efficiency of the equipment. So just by way of context. Then the next slide, so getting back to the HFC free debate, so we've made that commitment to make sure that we have HFC free equipment or no new HFC equipment by 2020. We're working very hard towards that. As you can imagine, in Europe, that has been quite easy. Last year, up to 85% of new fridges purchased in Europe been HFC free. The only exceptions were there are a number of models in which we didn't have equipment available. That's changing quite rapidly. So as you can see, with the regulatory framework in place, this is an achievable target. But outside of that, in particularly, let me focus on the Latin American countries that we're talking about, and the African countries in Southern Africa, often being the first mover in terms of procuring that equipment. The challenges are substantial in the sense that the models are not available, the suppliers do not either have it not available in the particular market, or they don't have it available at all. So the focus for us has been over the last 18 months in terms of particularly how we drive the purchasing of new equipment in those markets. The next slide, please. So this is a list of challenges which come directly from our internal operations, but none of it would surprise you. Anyone who's trying to introduce a new technology across a number of markets at the same time would be facing some of these challenges. How do we build a resilient end-to-end supply chain? How do we make sure that we have the correct models in place? How do we have them certified? So firstly tested, then certified. We certainly faced initially substantial cost pressures from suppliers on hydrocarbon particularly. Being the first mover in the market, you often end up being the one paying for the conversion and the introduction of new models. Like any market who reaches maturity, as soon as you reach a critical point, you very rapidly move towards cost parity as others get on board. But as that first one, you're often under cost pressure, and as you know in today's economy, that's quite a tough one to justify internally. So a lot of work has gone into auditing the service providers and their capability, making sure that they have the training capability to either undertake the maintenance or to train those who undertake the maintenance. We find that there's not always a universally enough focus on the importance of safety when you deal with hydrocarbons. It's a very important part and something that we increasingly strengthen is the awareness of the safety issues, particularly in some of those markets where we operate, where you sometimes have informal servicing, etc. In one or two markets where we have, where some of our local operations were moving ahead of the curve and introduced hydrocarbon coolers before the servicing capability was in place, and then when they had challenges with the operation of the equipment, they struggled to find the maintenance availability. So, and that led to some internal resistance in some people say, oh, we introduced this new technology and now we're really struggling to get maintenance for it. So it's very important to put the whole package in place in terms of making sure that the equipment is audited, certified, and that you have the maintenance and support capability in place. So those are the key challenges for us. They're not insurmountable. It just takes some effort, and once you have mainstreamed this into your business, the progress follows quite rapidly. Next slide. And then just finally, just to say that it's important for us to look at how we engage broader than just ourselves. Refrigerants naturally has been a very natural home for us. It's been an incredibly helpful part of the journey to find like-minded companies who've been on the and we find a great deal of value from them. And similarly, we also find a great deal of value from both UNEP and Greenpeace in terms of helping us understand the broader policy environment as the global policy regime takes shape, what the pressure points are, advice on how to proceed. So that's very important for us. And then also we work quite actively with the Consumer Goods Forum, which is a much broader base, so very important to move that broader corporate base forward. But clearly you don't have the, well, not all the members are at the leadership level that you find in refrigerants naturally, which is a great pleasure for us to be part of. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andre, for your presentation. And before we listen to our next presenter, let me take a moment to invite the participants to send their questions through the chat box. Please indicate your name, organization, and country. We will now listen to Bertie Jacob, Senior Research and Development Manager, Unilever. Bertie, you have the floor. Can you please share your screen and unmute your microphone? Okay, so we will go to the next presentation. So now we will listen to David Hazenschwanter, Global Sustainability Manager, Red Bull. Julia, I will give you the floor for the presentation. David, Julia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Just waiting for the slides.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is David Hazenschwantner. I'm Global Sustainability Manager at Red Bull. And today I wanna explain you how we tackle the issue of the barriers in the servicing and maintenance of natural refrigerant systems. In the case of Middle East and Asia, especially today the example is from India. Next slide, please. Okay. So how is our process for launching coolers in a country? First, we check the legislative situation in the country. And second, we check which certifications are necessary concerning country and refrigerant. That means that our suppliers operate the certification process on behalf of us, of Red Bull, and we as Red Bull consider together with our suppliers which certifications are necessary. Then the next step is that Red Bull will check the service partners for the following. Are they authorized and approved for maintaining coolers with natural refrigerant? And do they have the experience and tools for maintaining and properly recycle our coolers? And last but not least, if all the steps mentioned are okay, then placement or launch of the natural refrigerant or new technology in the market. That sounds good, everything, but next slide, please. The problem is that we often realize that our service partners do not have the experience and or the authorization for cooler maintenance. So how do we tackle that issue? Next, thank you. So all efforts to ensure energy efficiency will, however, be useless if the equipment is not operated correctly, and so human errors also plays a key role here. Following a best practice example in India. We organized training sessions with our service partners in Mumbai and Bangalore. So Red Bull has invited for that session our cooler manufacturers from China and Europe, and we held a multi-day training with focus on hydrocarbon refrigeration technology and refrigerant in general, in our case for R290 and R600 propane and isobutane, and product-specific introduction of individual cooler. Additionally, tools for maintenance were recommended to guarantee or make sure that the repair process will happen in a safe way. The aim for that is to increase the product life cycle of our cooler and to reduce the CO2 footprint, of course. Availability of the components. We know that the procurement for natural refrigerant components in developing countries is not easy, so how we can solve that problem? We have a centralized procurement of spare parts at the Red Bull headquarters, so we can ensure that the spare parts are available, that the ordered components are the right ones, and that the delivery of the spare parts from the plants of our suppliers have no or just a small time delay. Last but not least, recycling of our coolers or end of life cycle. So our partners are obliged to recycle our coolers properly in regarding to national and international standards and regulations. And we, Red Bull, as an Austrian-based company, sets, of course, certain minimum standards in developing countries as we do in Western European countries. Okay, thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much, David. Let's maybe start the question and answer. And then we will try to see if we can still listen to the presentation by Bertie Jacob from Unilever.
Okay, thank you, Samira. We already have one question, and it's Andre. This one is for you. So there was a question on how exactly you strengthen the awareness for safety issues regarding hydrocarbons.
Thanks for the question. Thanks, Julia. We have two processes. The one is as part of the engagement with our suppliers on new fridge models. We make very sure that there's a very clear understanding of our suppliers of the issues. By and large, the major equipment manufacturers understand this very well. The key for us is to make sure that that is built into increasingly some of the training programs for their service providers. So we're getting a much more systematic that training is also, if it's not provided by the equipment manufacturer itself, which it is, if the maintenance is provided by someone else or the servicing, then we work quite hard to make sure that the service providers are trained to the right level. The second part is we've developed an internal set of guidelines which we used initially primarily for our own sales force. So our own sales force who tend to visit the operations, and they see the fridges quite regularly, and they look for all sorts of things in terms of how they are stacked and whether they are clean and whether they're in the right position and whether the right brand is in the right place and whether the lights are working, etc. To build an awareness, which is quite new for them at this point in terms of understanding the basic safety procedures. And we've adapted that also that it can be used for training with our retailers. So those would be particularly the small shop owners, that they understand the issues. That's still in debate exactly how we're going to roll that out. We have something internally called the Sales Academy, which develops and rolls out training material across the group, and we're just finalizing the curriculum to roll that out as part of the engagement, both with our sales staff as well as the retailers who actually use the fridges.
Okay, thank you, Andre. We actually have a quick follow-up question for you. So it's a participant from Switzerland, and she's asking what you do to reduce the energy consumption of your units. So in addition to using natural refrigerants, what other measures are taken to reduce the energy consumption?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the two primary drivers are using LED lights, which is an important part of making sure that the beer is visually displayed, but that you use much less energy by switching to LED lights in fridges, both in terms of new fridges, but also increasingly retrofitting old fridges. And then by far the biggest impact comes through the energy management devices, which we initially retrofitted substantially into fridges. So those are the mechanisms that manage the energy use at different times of the day, that automates it, that make sure that the fridge doesn't cool more than it needs to, that the beer is at the right temperature at the right time of day, that the cooling is adapted to the intensity. So if you open the fridge once or twice a day, as compared to if you open it 40 times a day, that is automated. So that has gone a long way. And then, of course, We also know that with the introduction of hydrocarbons that it's quite possible to specify different equipment in terms of condensers and pumps, etc., that are much more energy efficient. And so the combination of the equipment, the energy management devices, and the LED lighting, it's actually quite astounding if you look at the energy that a fridge uses that was purchased, say, 10 years ago as a top quality fridge, but had none of these features, and you compare that with the top of the range fridge that you can install today with the same capacity, that you could easily literally save between 40 and 50% of the energy consumption per fridge. And we've done some work just for interest's sake to see what does that translate to in terms of financial savings for the retailer. So clearly the benefit doesn't come to us, although we own most of those fridges. They are operated by the retailers. So the savings come to them in terms of reduced electricity bills. And that's absolutely appropriate. We're happy with that. But we do think we can do a little bit more to show the financial benefits to them, that they also understand and appreciate that saving.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andre, for your answer. And I think we're actually ready to hear Bertie's presentation now. He's online and his mic is working, so that's great. We'll be coming back to other questions later, and also after the webinar, we'll be answering more questions via email. So don't worry if your questions are not getting answered right away. So Bertie, the floor is yours. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Samir. And hello, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Apologies for the slight breakdown in technology. I think these things happen, but I'll try to make up some time. My name is Bertie Jacob. I'm a senior R&D manager at Unilever, as was introduced earlier. I work in the ice cream business, and I'm based in the UK, responsible for innovations in the area of selling systems, which is basically all our freezer cabinets, our dispensing systems, and the sustainability aspects in all our innovations. I'm really happy to join this webinar with some of all the other members of RefNat, UNEP, Greenpeace, and to share Unilever's experience in the use of natural refrigerants and specifically hydrocarbons in our selling systems. You've all heard of Unilever. I thought just like the other speakers have done. Yeah. Okay. I think, I don't know if you've missed the earlier ones, but just moving on, the Unilever founders, William Lever and others, had a purpose and which seemed audacious at that time, and it was achieved in Britain. But so, yeah, so to continue, the government struggled to agree and implement global solutions on climate change and human development. But at Unilever, we believe the world cannot wait. The urgency is now, and that business and brands have to be part of the solution. So that is why we believe that companies which address both the needs of the environment and the concerns of citizens will prosper over the long term. And it's this thinking that's behind our vision that has been set by our Chief Executive Paul Polman of doubling the size of our business while reducing our environmental footprint and increasing our positive social impact. Our blueprint for reaching our vision is what perhaps many of you have already heard of, the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And this vision is underpinned by our purpose to make sustainable living commonplace. But for us to achieve our purpose, we have to develop a new way of doing business because the old economic systems are no longer fit for purpose. So what are we doing as Unilever? We're developing new business models in which agricultural raw materials come from sustainable sources, farmers' livelihoods are improved, and the planet is protected for future generations. We see tackling these challenges not just problems to be solved, but these are opportunities to grow our business. So that brings me to our ice cream business. Unilever is the largest ice cream company in the world with well-known brands that many of you are aware of like Magnum, Cornetto, Ben & Jerry's and Walls. And we own over 3 million ice cream cabinets around the world. I want to give you a historical perspective to our refrigerants policy and the journey we've made so far. Just to let you know that Unilever stopped buying cabinets which uses chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, as a refrigerant in 1995, and we started replacing them with HFCs. At the same time, we also replaced CFC blowing gas for the insulation, the foam that we used in our selling systems and cabinets, to hydrocarbon, and which was mainly cyclopentane. And the decision to use hydrocarbons was made in 1999, and we also considered other alternatives like CO2. As mentioned earlier, Unilever have been playing a pioneering role in sustainability with the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And in the area of refrigerants, we made a commitment in the year 2000 to purchase HFC-free cabinets by 2005. And it's important to note, by 2004, we had over 12,000 HC cabinets. The decision to use HCs was made in 2001, and we've been at it and being persistent and consistent in the way we've moved ahead with it. And as part of refrigerants, naturally, we made great progress. And the decision to move to HCs was based on very detailed safety studies and risk assessments. We had comparative laboratory and field tests that we performed. And as I mentioned earlier, we looked at alternatives like CO2, but HC was the best choice for our application, which was a low temperature application of -18 degrees and lower. Currently, we have 2.2 million hydrocarbon cabinets, which is substantial currently, considering the effort that was made, the challenges we had, as many of the other speakers alluded to, and we've made great progress with having 2.2 million HC cabinets. We are founder members of the Refrigerants Naturally initiative, and we take pride in continuing to be a member and supporting the important role of phasing out HFCs by sharing technical and safety data. And through RefNat, we encourage a change from HFCs at the point of sale equipment usage, and we demonstrate to peer groups and opinion formers who work on HFC-free applications. This slide shows the effect of the refrigeration on the environment. This is something you're already perhaps aware of. This slide shows the impact of chlorofluorocarbons and HFCs on the ozone depletion potential and the global warming potential. Clearly, hydrocarbon with zero ODP and GWP give us the green option, as well as a 9% energy efficiency in our systems. And again, we heard from earlier speakers the importance of energy reduction in our systems, and this is something we continue to work on while we move into hydrocarbons. In terms of hydrocarbons, propane, which is R290, and isobutane, R600A, are the two preferred HE refrigerants that we use for our low temperature applications. Moving on, let's start to look at the implications of using natural refrigerants for suppliers, for servicing, and through the supply chain. For a manufacturer of commercial refrigeration who's already producing freezers using HFCs, there's no major issue, as HC technology is based on the existing technologies with some minor modifications. The charge limit of the refrigerant as it currently stands, as per international safety standards, is 150 grams per circuit. For suppliers, there'll be some investments on the filling lines to ensure safety features are built in. And we also know that all major compressor manufacturers around the world are producing compressors that are suitable for HC and available at comparable costs. Our suppliers who manufacture these systems for us follow the functional specifications to ensure safe design. And we've seen that there are no significant extra costs for the units that are produced using HC refrigerants. Moving on to the implications for servicing, and which was the topic for today, it's important to ensure refrigerant quality is made available for servicing. This is now widely available, and help is also available from manufacturers to help source the right refrigerant. It's important that as legislation may vary from country to country, that people who use the refrigerant check with the local regulations and to see what regulations are in place for the use of HCs. Consulting domestic suppliers is something which we encourage. That only this is used. In terms of how we in Unilever manage the process, the diagram you see now shows very simply the life cycle of a freezer cabinet, from manufacturing to transport to the warehouse and to the point of sale where the operation of selling our ice cream takes place, the regular servicing over the life of the unit, and then finally to disposal. We have a small group of. So moving on to the operation. Operation is a key area of focus for us, where we interact with customers and consumers. Ensuring that our cabinets are reliable is important, as the value of the contents of these, which is basically ice cream, has a higher value than the cabinet itself. Therefore, we want avoidance of loss of sales. Also important to mention that hydrocarbon cabinets have proven to be at least as reliable as the HFC equivalent. But of course, the cabinets must be absolutely safe. Global experience over more than 10 years have provided no evidence of any safety issue related to HC cabinets. And experience has shown that HC cabinets are no less or more prone to breakdowns or leaks than their HFC equivalents. Coming to servicing outside the factory at the service centers, servicing is the operation where safety aspect are to be really carefully managed. Given the large variation in how maintenance is managed, good training material is a key aspect to safe use. We have cabinet managers around the world who are provided with training packages to use in training of their service technicians. And this includes presentation materials, one-page reckoners, as you can see on this slide. So it's basically a document that we share with them, and this is an excerpt from a safe servicing guideline that we give. We emphasize that training must only be conducted with qualified refrigeration technicians and done by competent trainers. This is really about getting the basics right and getting it right first time. This is a ready reckoner. It's a safe guideline, and it is what it says, a safe guideline, highlighting that HC refrigerants are potentially flammable. With sealed or solid-state electrical devices, they really do not ignite HC refrigerant. And working safely in an environment free of ignition sources, ensuring that area is well ventilated, use of the right service procedures and sealing systems, for example, the shredder valve that was used, use of identification labels with a flammable sticker are simple guidelines that ensures safe working. Coming to the disposal of our cabinet, this is the last part of the supply chain, and in terms of the life cycle of the cabinet, Unilever has a disposal policy for all refrigerants. These procedures are followed by our operating teams in all local countries. As you also perhaps know, HC can be vented to the environment, where this is legally allowed by the local legislation. We also provide additional information to third-party disposable companies to ensure that the policies are followed. So finally, in summary, and to summarize what we've heard so far, HC technology is well known and understood. Over 1 billion domestic freezers and fridges are in operation around the world. We have many years of operating experience in Unilever with hydrocarbon ice cream cabinets, and we have seen that there are no cost implications in converting to hydrocarbons. A bonus here, we get good energy efficiency. We've seen a 9% improvement. This reduces global warming impact, and this has more of an impact than just the change of the refrigerant. And finally, the training of service personnel is key. Do it right the first time, and it will serve you in the years to come. Hope this is useful and informative. Thank you for your listening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Bertie. It was very interesting to listen to your presentation despite the technical matter. So now I would like to open the floor again for question and answer. So Julia, I'm giving you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Samira, and thank you, Bertie, for presenting this really great content. We actually have a question to Unilever, but it applies to the other members as well, so feel free if you would like to answer. I was asked if there has been any retrofitting of HC technologies. So has there been any retrofitting of old HFC units to implement HC?
Is that a question to me, Julia?
Yes, it's a question to you and to the other members as well, if they would like to answer.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, I'll answer from a Unilever viewpoint. In terms of retrofit, I presume it means converting an existing HFC or a CFC freezer to HC. If that was a question, well, we haven't gone in for that application. We've clearly made it a point to ensure that all safety aspects of our equipments are borne in mind. And as you know, retrofit is not something that we'd like to be done by local service centers, and also with cabinets that are produced and warranties served by the approved supplier. We'd like to honor that. So we avoid anything. We actually phase out, we take out these cabinets from our fleet, and we replace it with a new cabinet. It's cheaper and it's much more simpler, and I think also ensures that all safety aspects in terms of flammable resistant components are actually in use in the new component in the new freezer. So yes, so we avoid retrofitting old cabinets with HC.
Okay, thank you, Bertie. Any of the other members who would like to add anything to this? All right, then we'll just go ahead with the next question. I think, Antoine of Coca-Cola, this is best answered by you because you're the main end user of CO2 systems. We have a question of how small the CO2 systems are, and do they require secondary cooling in the way that supermarket systems use secondary cooling?
Thanks, Julia. So we have been using CO2 technology since early 2004. And as you saw on my presentation, we have around 1 million pieces of equipment around the globe now. We do not use a secondary system. It basically when you look at the CO2 system or HFC system, you cannot see the difference. It's pretty the same. It's just the compressor different. The circuit works at the higher pressure, so the components are more pressure resistant, but there is no secondary system. It's as simple as the HFC or the hydrocarbons.
Okay, thank you for that.
That's the question, Julie?
Yes, thank you. And another question that I'd like to address to Andre Fourie of SabMiller. You mentioned that you had some barriers to break through when you introduced the equipment in Latin American countries. Was that specific to servicing, or was that to having the equipment procured in that country as well? Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Yes, it was regarding both, and some of the early procurement on hydrocarbons about 2 years ago. We really struggled to get the models that we require in HC. So that took some lengthy negotiations with suppliers to make sure that we get the right models available. So both procurement and servicing. And I'm sorry, I need to run. I see we over the hour. I'm running into another call. But if there are any more questions for me, please let me know. I'm very, very happy to engage. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Andre. And I think at this point, we can just collect the remaining questions and answer them via email. We'd be happy to do that. So we already see the forwarded questions, and we will answer your questions after the session. From our side, from the Refrigerants Naturally Initiative, we'd like to thank you for joining us today for this webinar, and thank you for sticking through the technical issues. It's always interesting in each webinar what you run into. And I think Samira would like to say a few words on conclusion to this webinar.
Yes, thank you, Julia. Before we close today's session, on behalf of UNEP OzonAction, I would like to thank the speakers, yourself, Julia Both, Antoine Hazard, Andre Fourie, Brian Jacob, David Hazenschwanter, and all the participants for your time and interest. Also, I would like to inform you that you will receive by email a link to the information related to today's webinar session, that we will also shortly make the recorded version available on OzonAction website. We hope that you found this webinar of interest, and we would appreciate receiving your feedback to help us improve our webinar services. We would like also to hear about your suggestions for topics and potential speakers. Thank you all. The webinar ends now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.